Marcus glanced at the rearview mirror and noticed the car behind him slowing down sharply as it drifted toward the shoulder of the dusty country road in the late afternoon sun. He eased his own vehicle to a stop, turned off the engine, and stepped onto the warm pavement with a polite nod toward the lone woman standing by her sedan with a worried expression and a leather purse clutched to her side. The woman looked up, lips pressed together, and offered a small wave that trembled with frustration as she pointed at the flat tire resting limply against the wheel well. Marcus pulled his cap lower, smiled kindly, and walked over, asking after her day and checking for immediate danger before crouching down to examine the damaged tire and the bent rim. She took a deep breath and explained that she had missed the sharp curve earlier. Her tire had caught in a rocky verge, and she had no tools in her trunk to repair the damage on her own. He nodded, reached for the trunk release, and lifted the lid to reveal a neatly organized set of tools and a clean spare tire secured by a strap. With confident hands, Marcus unhooked the strap, laid the spare on the ground, and handed the jack to the woman, explaining exactly how to position it beneath the car for safety. The woman followed his instructions, her fingers fumbling at first before she settled into the rhythm of turning the crank to lift the car off the road. Marcus took the lug wrench, loosened the nuts in a star pattern, and delicately removed each nut with a slight tug that sent them clattering into the grass. He placed each nut in a small pile, set aside the damaged tire, and positioned the spare on the wheel bolts, making sure it hung straight before replacing the nuts by hand. She looked on with amazement as he tightened each bolt with skillful turns of the wrench until the tire sat solidly against the axle. Then Marcus gently lowered the jack, allowed the car's weight to settle, and gave the wrench one last twist on each bolt to ensure they would not come loose on her drive home. The woman's face broke into a grateful smile as she held out her hand to shake his and whispered "thank you" in a voice that trembled with relief. Marcus waved off her gratitude with a humble shrug and reminded her to check the tire pressure at the nearest service station to avoid any trouble on her way. She nodded again, wrote down his name and number on a scrap of paper, and promised to call if she had any further problems during her journey. As the sun dipped lower behind the hills, Marcus climbed back into his car and watched her drive cautiously back onto the pavement with her hazard lights blinking. He felt a warm glow of satisfaction at having helped someone in need, a feeling he rarely experienced in his busy life as an accountant in the city. The road stretched ahead under a sky painted with streaks of orange and purple, and Marcus turned the key in the ignition, ready to head home after a long day. He thought about the stranger and the kindness they had shared, unaware of how small moments could ripple into larger consequences. As he drove, the evening breeze rolled in through the open window, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers from the roadside. He reflected on how simple acts of generosity could brighten the darkest days for people he would likely never meet again. In his mind, he replayed the woman's gratitude and the rhythmic turn of the jack handle as she learned to trust her own strength. He wondered if she would remember his face when she looked at a spare tire in the future. The tires hummed against the asphalt, and the sound seemed to echo the steady pulse of his heartbeat as he thought of her safe drive home. Marcus felt content to have done something worthwhile without expecting anything in return. The dashboard clock blinked a few numbers, showing it was already past sunset, and he switched on his headlights to pierce the gathering dusk. Even the simple click of the turn signal seemed more meaningful now that he had helped change someone's tear into a smile. By the time he reached the edge of town, he realized the road home would be dark and quiet, but his spirits felt brighter than they had all day. He parked his car in the driveway of his small blue bungalow and climbed out, stretching his legs after the long ride. Dropping his keys in a small metal bowl by the door, he kicked off his shoes and made his way across the porch toward the living room. He flipped on the overhead light and was greeted by the warm glow of the cozy space he called home. The faint hum of the refrigerator mixed with the soft ticking of the wall clock as he set the spare tire he had borrowed on the kitchen table for a quick inspection. He examined the tire's treads and sidewalls, marveling at how the woman's spare had looked new and well-maintained. Putting the tools back in their box, he washed his hands at the sink and took a deep breath of the clean grout that lined the faucet. He dropped into the soft cushion of the sofa and considered ordering dinner, but his mind wandered back to the brief conversation with the woman on the road. In that moment of reflection, he felt a gentle calm settle over him, convinced that his small act of kindness had made a difference. With a contented sigh, he reached for the remote to turn on the TV, but instead let the quiet of the evening soothe his tired mind. As he lay back and closed his eyes, he drifted to sleep without knowing that the next day would begin with an unexpected visitor in a black SUV. The next morning's sunlight filtered through the white curtains as Marcus stirred from sleep with a soft stretch and glanced at the clock on his bedside table. It read 7:45, a time he rarely woke for leisurely breakfast, but today he felt rested and ready to start the day. Birds chirped outside, and the smell of fresh dew on the grass drifted through the open window as he slid out of bed. He crossed the hallway to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and splashed cold water on his face to chase away the last traces of dreams. After tossing on a clean shirt and slipping into jeans, he headed downstairs, expecting the quiet hum of an ordinary morning. But when he stepped into the living room, he noticed a faint rumble outside that sounded like an engine idling in the street. He moved to the window, lifted the corner of the curtain, and saw a sleek black SUV parked directly in front of his house. The tinted windows were dark, and he could not make out any shapes inside, only the reflection of the green lawn in the glass. His heart skipped a beat, and for a moment he wondered if he had overslept and missed an appointment he did not remember. He watched as the SUV's engine quietly purred, its lights off, its driver's door unmoved. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach as he considered going outside to ask what was happening. Instead, he poured himself a glass of water, trying to steady his nerves with each calm breath. He reminded himself that help could mean friendship, and he had been kind without foreseeing a payoff. Setting the glass on the coffee table, he picked up his phone and debated calling the local police station to report the unexpected vehicle. Then he thought better of it, wondering if he was overreacting to a simple commuter looking for directions. He peered closer, trying to find a clue, perhaps a bumper sticker or a company logo, but the paint was uniformly glossy. Stepping back, he considered calling the woman he had helped, but decided it would be odd to reach out after just one day. Instead, he grabbed his keys and decided to walk outside with his hands visible to show he meant no harm. He unlocked the front door, stepped onto the porch, and felt the cool morning air wash over him. The black SUV stood silent, unmoving, like a watchful shadow against the bright sun. Marcus cleared his throat and spoke in a clear voice. "Hello? Can I help you?" No answer came, and the tinted windows refused to yield any answers. He took an awkward step toward the vehicle, feeling each wooden board of the porch creak beneath his weight. When he reached the edge of the driveway, he realized the engine was still on, but the vehicle made not a single other sound. He placed his hand on the driver's side door handle and noticed it was locked tight. Standing there, he felt a growing sense of curiosity mixed with unease swirling in his chest. The quiet street held no other cars, no neighbors, and the only sound was the distant hum of a city waking up. Marcus straightened his shoulders, took a slow breath, and decided to knock on the glass to see if anyone was inside. He tapped the tinted window with his knuckle and waited, but no movement followed. A faint vibration from the idling engine tickled his ear, yet the scene remained frozen. Suddenly, the passenger door opened with a soft click, and he stepped back quickly. A tall man in a dark suit slipped out, his face still hidden behind an expensive pair of sunglasses despite the morning light. He closed the door with a precise motion before giving Marcus a slow nod. Marcus felt his plan to keep his hands visible disappear as the stranger stood between him and the vehicle. The man crossed the driveway in a smooth stride, sunlight glinting on his polished shoes. Marcus cleared his throat again, ready to ask questions, but the man spoke first in a quiet baritone voice. "Mr. Walker?" the man asked, using Marcus's last name. Marcus swallowed hard, his mind racing to recall if he had shared that information with anyone. He nodded, his voice caught in his throat as he tried to find the words to ask who he was and what he wanted. The man reached into his jacket, produced a business card, and extended it across the space between them without a hint of expression on his face. Marcus held the business card gingerly between his thumb and forefinger and read the embossed letters that spelled Black Onyx Corporation in bold uppercase type. He felt a shiver run down his spine as he turned the card over to find a second line that read, "Request a meeting at your earliest convenience." The stranger folded his arms and waited patiently on the driveway, his expression hidden behind dark glasses. Marcus cleared his throat and offered a small smile that wavered with uncertainty about what he had gotten himself into. The suited man simply nodded and then nodded toward the driver's door of the SUV, as if to say, "Follow me." Marcus hesitated for a moment, glanced back at his house, and then stepped off the driveway to approach the vehicle carefully. He placed the car in his pocket, kept his hands visible, and circled around to the passenger side of the SUV. When he reached the window, the stranger unlocked the door electronically with a button on his key fob. Marcus pushed the door open, slid onto the leather seat, and smelled the faint hint of lavender hanging in the air. The stranger closed the door behind him and walked around to the driver's side before sliding in beside him. The interior dashboard lit up with a soft glow as the stranger pressed a button and the SUV eased smoothly into reverse. Without a word, they slipped onto the quiet street and began to drive toward the center of town. Marcus tried to steady his breathing as they passed familiar shops and the old bakery, where the scent of bread often floated through the open windows. He remembered how simple life had been before he pulled over to help a stranger the day before. Now every street and every passing car felt like part of an unfolding mystery he had not asked to join. He swallowed hard and summoned the courage to break the silence with a quiet question about where they were going. The stranger turned his head slightly and replied, "To discuss your kindness and how we intend to return the favor." Marcus glanced at him and noted the calm confidence in his voice as though he spoke about a routine transaction. He nodded slowly, amazed at how calm the strangers seemed as they approached a modern building with tinted windows. A polished sign read Black Onyx Corporation in large metal letters above a set of automatic doors. The stranger parked the SUV in an underground garage, swapped seats without a word, and motioned for Marcus to follow him into the building. He closed the door, walked behind the suited man through a sleek lobby, and stared at the glass walls that reflected his own curious face. Receptionists typed quietly at their desks and glanced up briefly before returning to their screens. The suited man led Marcus down a hallway lined with framed portraits of company leaders who looked serious and powerful. At the end of the corridor, a pair of glass doors opened into a large conference room. Inside, a polished table extended almost the length of the room, and chairs waited on both sides. A middle-aged woman rose from the seat at the head of the table and walked forward to greet Marcus. She offered her hand, smiled warmly, and said, "Thank you for your help yesterday, Mr. Walker." Marcus took her hand and shook it with a mixture of pride and trepidation. Her blend of courtesy and authority made him feel at once welcome and cautious. She guided him to a chair and gestured for him to sit before taking her own seat across the table. Marcus sat down and heard the soft hum of an air vent overhead as he tried to steady his racing heart. The woman placed a folder in front of him and opened it to reveal photographs of the woman whose tire he had changed. Marcus recognized her instantly. A relieved smile, a tear at the corner of her eye, and the tire resting on the road behind her. The woman from the corporation said, "Our client wishes to thank you and ensure you are safe and comfortable in the coming weeks." Marcus's mind spun as he tried to process why a corporation would care about a stranger helping a woman change a tire. She continued by explaining that the woman he had helped was the daughter of a senior executive who valued gratitude. The executive had set aside resources to repay Marcus's act of kindness in a way that would help him. Marcus felt both honored and uneasy as he stared at the executive's promise written on official letterhead. He closed the folder gently and tried to find the right words to express his gratitude and his concerns in simple terms. The executive slid a typed document across the table that outlined a plan to provide Marcus with a small monthly stipend for 1 year. He looked down at the neat rows of typed words and saw figures that would clear his student loans and pay for a new roof on his house. Marcus reached for his glasses, slid them on, and adjusted the frames before reading every line with careful attention. The executive said softly, "We only ask you to continue your good work and trust that acts of kindness can change lives." Marcus took a breath, closed the folder, and looked up at her with honest gratitude in his eyes. He thanked them but admitted he felt uncomfortable accepting such a gift without offering something in return. The executive nodded and replied, "Your choice in how to use these funds is entirely yours, with no strings attached." He opened his mouth to speak but then hesitated, his mind racing to find the right way to accept while still feeling deserving. She stood and walked around the table to stand beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "If there is ever anything you need," she said, "you have but to reach out to this contact information at the bottom of the page." Marcus nodded and closed the document, letting out a slow breath that felt like a release. They escorted him out of the conference room with polite smiles and walked back through the sleek lobby corridors. When they reached the elevator, the suited man from the SUV pressed a button and held the door open for Marcus to step inside. He rode down to the parking garage in silence, feeling the stranger's calm presence beside him. At the bottom, the elevator doors opened to reveal the black SUV waiting under bright fluorescent lights. Marcus climbed into the back seat, and the stranger in the suit joined him quietly. The driver started the engine without a sound and backed the vehicle out of its space with precise skill. They emerged onto the street once more, and Marcus saw his own house as they passed in reverse. The suited man spoke for the first time since leaving the office. "Do you trust that good deeds come back in unexpected ways?" Marcus nodded and replied, I believe that kindness is its own reward, but I also believe in balance in life. The stranger turned his head slightly, as if satisfied with the answer, then turned forward as they drove. They stopped at the end of Marcus's street, and the suited man opened his door to let Marcus out. Marcus stepped onto the pavement, then turned to see the stranger lift the tinted window for a moment. The man's lips moved, and he said, Use your gift wisely, Mr. Walker. Marcus nodded again, took a step back, and watched as the SUV glided away silently. The stranger closed the tinted window, and the vehicle pulled out as smoothly as it had arrived. Marcus walked to his front door, feeling the contract and the weight of the decision heavy in his coat pocket. Inside, he set the papers on the kitchen table and paced back and forth in the bright morning light. He thought about his old debts, the rickety roof, and the dream of one day touring Europe on summer holiday. Yet he also remembered the excitement of small surprises and the joy of her grateful eyes under the setting sun. He wondered if accepting this help would change who he was at his core or just ease burdens he carried. His sister's voicemail pinged on his phone, reminding him of her return the next week. He thought about telling her everything, but he also wanted to protect her from secrets that felt too big. Marcus sighed and sat in the kitchen chair, rubbing his temples as he tried to calm the swirl of thoughts. He unfolded the paper once more and stared at the lines beside the executive's signature. It felt official and binding, yet it carried kindness instead of demands. He tapped his finger on the table, remembering how simple life had been before fate collided with generosity. For the first time, he hoped that a small gift could open doors without closing his own sense of self. With determination, Marcus picked up the pen at the end of the table and signed the contract with a steady hand. That afternoon, Marcus returned to his day job at the accounting firm with a secret resting inside his coat pocket. He slipped into the cubicle, sat at his desk, and plugged in his laptop, recalling both the tire change and the boardroom. Every time he logged into the financial spreadsheet, his mind wandered to the neat contract on his kitchen table. He took a sip of coffee and clicked through reports, forcing himself to concentrate on ledgers and balance sheets. The hum of printers and phones in the office felt strangely comforting as he settled into routine tasks. At lunchtime, he noticed a discreet envelope tucked under his office nameplate, seeming to appear from nowhere. He opened it with curious hands and found a set of keys attached to a small blue tag embossed with the letters Repay. Beneath the keys lay a note that read, Use these keys to collect what you need. More details can be found at the address below. Marcus read the address to be a small warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place he had never visited before. He hesitated, looked around at his coworkers, and then tucked the keys and note into his pocket before returning to work. The afternoon dragged on as he tried to hide his excitement and his fear of what lay behind the locked doors. When the clock finally struck 5, he closed his laptop, gathered his belongings, and headed out into the bright sky. The drive to the warehouse took only 20 minutes, but his heart felt like it would burst in that time. He parked his car in front of a plain gray building with a single door and no windows. Inside, he found a small reception desk manned by a friendly clerk who handed him a small card scanner. Scan your blue tag, she said, smiling, and we will retrieve your items for you. Marcus swallowed and ran the keys across the scanner, hearing a quiet beep that felt like permission. Moments later, a door opened, and a delivery cart rolled out with boxes labeled personal assistance. He picked up a box and felt its weight, lighter than he expected, yet oddly heavy with promise. The clerk handed him a receipt and said, Thank you for your service. Come back any time you need. Marcus nodded, thanked her, and drove home with the box sitting in his passenger seat. Once inside his house, he placed the box on the kitchen table and carefully lifted the lid. Inside, he found gift cards for groceries, a voucher to repair his roof, and a small book titled Kindness Returns. The book contained short stories about everyday people whose good deeds had unexpected consequences. Marcus read the first story and felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes as he recognized himself in the tale. The sun was setting as he finished the last paragraph, and the room glowed with warm orange light. He closed the box and thought about how a simple act could open a door to something larger. As he set the lid back on, he heard a gentle knock at his front door. He crossed the living room and opened the door to find the same woman he had helped standing on his porch. She smiled shyly, holding a small bouquet of daisies wrapped in newspaper. Marcus stood stunned, forgetting to invite her inside as she stepped forward. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and said softly, I wanted to thank you in person again. Marcus invited her in, and she handed him the flowers before taking a seat on the sofa. He offered her a glass of water, and she nodded gratefully as she settled against the cushions. They sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the simple warmth of human company. Finally, Marcus asked why she had come back, given everything he already knew about her father's generosity. She replied that she had felt compelled to see the man who had shown her kindness with his own eyes. Her voice wavered with emotion as she explained how that moment had changed her view of the world. Marcus felt a gentle peace wash over him as they talked about small gestures that made life brighter. When she left later that evening, he closed the door behind her, feeling that the world had shifted in a good way for them both. The next morning, Marcus woke early, determined to put the resources he had received to work in his community. He poured a cup of coffee, grabbed his notebook, and listed projects that needed attention around town. First on his list was repairing the leaky roof on the house where an elderly couple lived alone. He called the roofing company with a voucher and scheduled the repairs for the following week. Next, he thought of the local food pantry struggling with low donations and decided to send several grocery gift cards. After that, he arranged to sponsor new shoes for children at the community center who would otherwise go without. Marcus felt a surge of purpose as he made phone calls, filled out forms, and wrote checks. Each task reminded him of the power that a single act of help could hold. He worked through the morning at a brisk pace, feeling lighter than he had in months. By midday, he took a break on his porch, sipping water and watching the neighbors mow their lawns. He reflected on how his life had changed from simple routines to purposeful actions. A familiar hum caught his attention, and he looked up to see the black SUV rounding the corner once more. His heart skipped a beat as it pulled up quietly in front of his house for the final time. The driver's door opened, and the suited man stepped out, carrying a small envelope. Marcus walked down his porch steps and greeted him with a nod rather than a question. The man handed him the envelope and said, "This is from our client. Consider it a small token of approval." Marcus opened the envelope to find a note that read, "Well done. Continue to spread kindness wherever you go." Inside also lay a single black key that matched the tag he had scanned at the warehouse. Marcus held the key between his thumb and finger and thought about where it might fit. He looked up at the man and asked if there was a place he could use it to find more ways to help others. The stranger smiled beneath his sunglasses and replied, "That door will open only when the time is right." With a final nod, the suited man returned to the SUV and closed the tinted window behind him. The engine purred again, and in a smooth motion the vehicle drove off into the afternoon light. Marcus watched it go, feeling a gentle sense of closure and a renewed sense of hope. He closed the envelope and walked back to the front door of his house. Inside, he placed the new key on his kitchen table next to the contract and the bouquet of daisies. He looked around at the cozy room, the repaired roof overhead, and the small book on his shelf. His heart felt full as he realized how one moment on the roadside had changed so many lives. That evening, he prepared dinner with a lighter spirit and called his sister to tell her about his adventures. She laughed in delight and praised him for his kindness, promising to visit soon to help share the gifts. Marcus felt gratitude for the unexpected turn his simple act had taken. He opened the book Kindness Returns and read a new story about how kindness could open locked doors. As he read the last lines, the new key on his table glowed softly in the lamplight. He closed the book and whispered to himself, "Thank you for trusting me to do the same for others." Outside, the stars began to appear one by one in the clear night sky. Marcus sat on his porch with a small smile, knowing he was part of a chain of kindness that could stretch around the world. And when he closed his eyes to sleep that night, he dreamed of doors opening, one by one, for every generous heart. The next morning, he awoke ready to find the door that the black key would unlock. But for now, he cherished the quiet peace of doing good without expectation of reward. And in that gentle promise, Marcus found the true reward of a simple kindness shared on a dusty roadside. The next morning, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed and held the small black key between his fingers. He remembered the stranger's words about the door opening only when the time was right. He looked around his bedroom for any locked door that matched the key. He rose, walked across the room, and saw a wooden cabinet with a tiny lock he had forgotten about. The cabinet had once held his grandmother's old letters, but had been sealed for years. Marcus fetched a small stool to stand on so he could reach the lock easily. He inserted the black key into the lock and heard a soft click that made his heart race. He turned the key and opened the cabinet door slowly. Inside, he found a stack of handwritten letters tied with a red ribbon. Curiosity urged him to pick up the ribbon and untie it with gentle care. As he unfolded the top letter, he realized it was addressed to him from the woman whose tire he had changed. The letter thanked him again for his kindness and promised that her family would pay it forward to others in need. Marcus felt a warm light spread through his chest as he read her words. He reached into the cabinet and pulled out more letters, each one from someone touched by the act of kindness. One letter came from the elderly couple whose roof he helped repair. Another was from a child at the community center who had received new shoes because of the grocery gift cards. Each letter expressed gratitude and told how small acts could change lives in big ways. Marcus took a deep breath and smiled, realizing that the key had unlocked more than just wood. He gathered all the letters and walked downstairs to the kitchen table. He spread the letters out like a fan and read each one, his eyes shining with tears of joy. Outside, the sun rose higher, and the kitchen filled with bright morning light. Marcus felt a gentle peace settle over him, knowing his kindness had become a ripple of good. He remembered how he had once worried that a simple act would be forgotten. Now he held proof that kindness could travel farther than he had ever imagined. He folded the letters carefully and placed them back in the cabinet for safekeeping. Then he removed the cabinet's original lock and set it aside with the black key. Knowing the letters were safe, he closed the cabinet and locked it again. Marcus sat back at the table and wrote a new letter of his own. In neat handwriting, he thanked the anonymous stranger who had arranged everything. He promised to continue helping others whenever he could. After sealing his letter in an envelope, he addressed it to Black Onyx Corporation. He walked outside to the mailbox by the curb and dropped the letter inside. As he walked back toward his house, he felt a soft breeze brush against his face. He looked at the empty road and felt certain that someone else might stop to help another stranger soon. Inside, he poured himself a cup of coffee and sat by the window. Marcus watched neighbors wave at each other and children ride bikes down the street. Everything looked calm and full of promise on that bright morning. He raised his mug and whispered, "To kindness that never ends." He drank his coffee slowly, savoring the moment and the story that had brought him here. And with that, Marcus closed his eyes, ready for whatever new door life would open next.